Positions of power and influence exist. They do. And you'd think this would be basic box you have to check if you're going to take the position of God, is to make sure, if there's going to be these positions of power and influence, that people who are bad or have negative motives or are willing to do bad things or have in it just for themselves, whatever it is, make sure they don't get into those positions, right? I mean, this would be the easiest thing for God to do, is to see somebody who doesn't have real love for people in their hearts climbing up towards a position where they can really affect things in the world and flick them off, right? But that doesn't happen. So is it that God can't do that, or there is no God, or is there something that those people, even people who are only in it for themselves, is there a reason that they can actually be more useful in those positions than those of us who are not only in it for ourselves? That's the question. News from heaven. Hey, like and subscribe. And if you want to support this program, we're trying to grow our monthly subscriber support network. This is the only reason we as an independent nonprofit channel can do this kind of programming, is because you guys hook us up, help us out. Go to otlemonthly.causevox.com, become a monthly supporter, and you'll know that you did something. All right, let's download Divine Providence. We're picking up right from where we left off with our last episode, which is, last time we were talking about, why do some people seem to get more breaks in life than others, and those breaks don't necessarily correlate with whether or not they're good people. So that's us looking out from our world and seeing, like, wait, what's going on here? Why do some people get real good things happening to them where other people get really negative things, or they don't get the same kind of power and wealth and all that? And we were asking, well, what is that stuff really? Does it matter? This episode, we're trying to figure out, look, if there's us, right, if there's this constant sort of struggle we're trying to reach out to what's good and true, but there's all these negative thoughts and feelings that are coming in, all the clouds in the mind, and this is plenty to deal with. Your own mental weather can really get you down. Isn't that enough without having it so that some negative people get over here and can affect the world? Look at that person. And are also bringing trouble to us. I mean, can't we just cut this out? What's going on with that? Well, let's read on and find out. This is 250 in Divine Providence. Again, it's a free download. Subsection 3. And here we go. Swedenborg feels a need to talk. I need now to say something about why Divine Providence, this is God's governance of everything, allows people who are irreligious at heart, even if you have negative connotation toward religion, this means bad at heart, can be raised to high rank and to become wealthy. Irreverent or evil people can be this is the load-bearing sentence. Irreverent or evil people can be just as useful as devout or good people. Key in on this term, useful. In fact, they can be more ardent about it being this usefulness, because they are focused on themselves in the good they do and regard advancement as intrinsically useful. So if you have a person, let's say we have sort of two potential people, right? And what matters really is what we've got in our hearts. And if we have one person who has, let's say, love and truth in their heart, whereas somebody else has, love for themselves and falsity in there, which leads them to want to go after what we're talking about last time of rank and wealth. These people can both be seeking out high positions, but if you've got this going on, if your primary purpose is, man, I'm awesome, I want power, I want influence, I want praise, I want adoration, I want sensory gratification, I want wealth, I want all that, that fire burns very, very hot. And you can see this. People get absolutely driven for things. Swedenborg is asserting here that you can actually, that fire can even more easily push you into action than even the love of goodness and truth that can pop up in the hearts of people who do care about other people and care about the world, because they're focused on themselves and the good that they do. So when we go over here and we do some kind of project, let's say this person is doing a project for the world, and this person is doing a project for the world, and this person, when they're looking at that project, they see the goodness, the way you'll affect people's lives, and the truth, the means by which you do it. That's what they're focused on in there. Whereas this person is just seeing like, man, if I pull this off, there's me. I'm going to get such a reward out of this because it helps people. Actually, and that leads to advancement being a cause unto itself. The whole, if I'm the point, just doing things to advance, that is its own use. That's its own reason for being. That actually can make you more ardent to do stuff. You may be able to do many more things or have the fire to do more, whereas this can actually, in most cases, wane and not drive you in the same way. The stronger their self-love grows then, the more intense is their passion for service for the sake of their own renown. So you can have, and it's cool to always, Swedenborg talks about people, and we try to say, oh, this person's good, this person's not good. I like to look for it in myself. And this is, I think, what he's leading us to try to do. He's using this as sort of a literary device or a rhetorical device. That's probably the right thing, to get us to think about these two states of mind, which we all have to be choosing which states of mind we want to live in. That's what life in the world is. It's us getting to try on these different hats of, okay, now I'm a person that cares only about myself. I'm a person that cares good and truth. What do you like? And what are you going to work towards incorporating? So when there is this passion for service, you can even feel like, yeah, I really like doing these things, but you can if you examine it and sort of add and subtract elements, you can tell when it's like, oh, really, I like myself, and I like where this can get me, the kind of adulation this can get me. To me, it's like, oh, that's useful, because then I can know I got to peel something away here. You can still be going after the same thing, but you can come in with a little less ego baggage in it. Devout or good people do not have this kind of fire. Fascinating. Unless it is subtly fueled by rank. So you can just have a little shade of I'd like perks as well in there. Oh, it's so funny that, yeah. And it's not always. There can be some people, but that in general, if you're going to go out and do something that is really arduous. Right now, in the United States of America, we're leading up to a presidential election. And I say leading up, it's still a little ways out there, but it's all in the media and all that sort of thing. And there's all these people that are getting ready to try to be the president, right? And it is a mammoth undertaking to be willing to do that for a lot of reasons. First of all, I was listening to this fascinating podcast about sort of the lesser known candidates right now, and they're going in and they're making all these little stops at these teeny little events and talking to a few voters at a time, right? There's a ton of legwork and time away from your family and just a grueling schedule and just having to put in this speech after speech after speech after speech. That's a lot of work, right? But then on the other hand, everybody starts attacking you, right? Everybody starts looking for dirt about you, and they start broadcasting that out to the world, and people turn on you, and you pay such a heavy price for it. What's the fire that's going to keep you going? You really got to have something that keeps you going. And Swedenborg is asserting that it's hard to find people who that love for what's good and true can withstand all that. Because when advancement itself is not the greatest good, when there's not a shade in there of like, wouldn't it be awesome if I was president or whatever, it's hard to find people who are willing to disrupt their lives and go through that much, and really also, I would say, think that they really need to be there. Because if you don't see yourself as just way better than other people, it's hard to really believe I need to be in that position. Right. So, okay. So what does this have to do with it? It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It doesn't mean there aren't good people in those positions. But what we already know, there's a lot of people who don't seem that good in those positions, because you get all these stories that come out of some kind of scandal. It seems like just commonplace to hear about wherever you are in the world, somebody in position of power, it comes out that they were doing bad things. That doesn't shock anyone anymore because it's sort of commonplace. So what can divine providence bring out of that? Even though there is this system where people who love themselves in the world want to push for stuff like that and are good at getting there, what's the Lord doing with that? So the Lord controls people of high rank who are irreligious at heart through their concern for their reputation. God cannot reach inside anybody, or will not, or what's the difference between those when you're God, and move you like a puppet, right, against your will. Everything, God has created a world in which everything is done through free will, but there are levers that can be pulled, and this one, the concern for the reputation, is one that can be used. Because if you are this person who are irreverent or evil, Swedenborg would define that as you got love of self driving everything, love of your own reputation and power, that naturally does not want its reputation to take a hit. So you can use that. People can be driven by their concern for that very reputation to get up in the morning and get after things and really do things. And because even if you're doing some action like this because you really want yourself, the good done is still good for the people that are done. The motive for you may change what it does to you spiritually, but the actual good that comes out of it, yeah, that can really help whatever people are benefiting from this action or policy or effort or whatever it is. He inspires them to do what is good for the commonwealth or the country, for the community or the city in which they live, and also for their own fellow citizens or neighbors. This is the Lord's government, his divine providence with people like this. This is why God doesn't just stop it from happening, because it could actually be that this person getting into this position can actually impact the whole in a good way, even though they're doing it for negative reasons. This is the chess that God has to play when you've got a world full of a lot of, in each of our hearts, we all have our own little part of love of self and love of the world. The Lord's kingdom is, in fact, an organized realm of constructive activities. That's a cool little fridge magnet. If you ever want to know what is the Lord's domain, what is heaven? It's an organized realm of constructive activities. Doing good because it helps. That's the joy of God. And where there are only a few individuals who perform service for the sake of service, he works things out so that people who worship themselves are raised to the higher offices where they are inspired to do good by their own love. This situation that we're talking about here is like a duct tape sort of situation. In heaven, it's not like that, because heaven is this conglomeration of all people who love service and love the neighbor. So there's no short supply of people who can do these leadership roles and do it out of love for God and love for the truth and love for love. But where there's not enough raw material, God can instead say, all right, well, we'll work with this and we'll get it so that these even people that are doing it for themselves can create the conditions in which people can thrive and be happy and live the lives that will lead them to eternal happiness. Imagine some hellish country on earth, though there is no such thing, Canada. I'm just kidding. My dad was born in Canada, and I absolutely love Canada. That's why I could say it. We'll see next time I'm at the border if they let me through. See you next summer. Where nothing but self-love held sway, where self-love itself was the devil. Would everyone not do more constructive things? And this is not what I would picture. And Swedenborg claims to have seen hell and what it's like, and so, but he's coming from that angle. This is actually because of this principle. Even in a place where there's no goodness or very little of it, you still get order. It's not chaos and a total bloodbath. There's order because of this. Would everyone not do more constructive things because of the fire of self-love and the radiance of his or her own renown than people did in any other country? While all of them mouthed off about the public good, they would have their own good at heart. All of them would be turning to their leader in order to be promoted, each one wanting to be the greatest. Can people like this see that God exists? They are enveloped by smoke like a burning building, and no gleam of spiritual truth can get through to them with its light. I have seen this smoke surrounding a hell made up of people like this. See, I'm telling you, look what happens in the scope of this paragraph. We go from saying, imagine something that was hellish, on earth, okay? And it sounds just like it could be a thought experiment, or he's trying to prove a principle or something like that. But then, by the end of it, he's saying, I've seen this very phenomenon in a hell made up of people like this. And in heaven and hell, in spiritual world, people's motives, if you've got your intellect right, people's motives are clear and obvious. Just like here, actions are clear and obvious, their motives are clear and obvious. So he can tell this is what's driving the people in this community, and this is how it shakes out, that this is actually an amazing mitigation or defense mechanism that Providence has built in, so that when you do get inevitably people who choose to love power and dominion over goodness and truth, spiritually you gravitate towards people who love the same thing as you. So you get all these people together who only care about that. But because there's this love of reputation in there is a semblance of community that can be built. There's a semblance of civility, even if it's not in the hearts, that you can create a society where people can live even out of that, because of this fear for their own reputation, keeping things in check. This is God not just looking out for people who love what's good and true, but people who love what's evil and false, making sure that there's always going to be at least a decent quality of life, even if you've made yourself sort of worship these negative things and self-advancement alone. Also, this little line in here, that we were talking about this example, country and how they would be, but he throws us in here. If you're after that, if you think advancement is what matters, are you really ever going to be able to hear this still small voice? And I don't just mean God as a concept that there is a being, because we had in the previous episode, you see that people who can worship God and think that there's such a thing, but don't really have God, which means knowing God by God's nature, which is love of the whole, love of service. Where do we have it? I told you, the Lord's kingdom is in fact an organized realm of constructive activities, which doesn't sound very great or beautiful at all, but if you think about what it means, if you think about the experience of going in and doing something, helping someone where they need help, and the joy of knowing about how that lifts their spirit, that's God. And really, to knowing that God exists is understanding that joy is actually eternal life, and that is what is to be pursued above all, and the other things slot in below that. So if you're in this constant thinking about self, and this is great, I love this, thinking about self, thinking about advancement, thinking about making sure that you get somewhere, when I'm in that mode, am I really ever going to be able to pick out the subtle leadings of things that are innocent and humble and true? Because there's just too much of this smoke, too much of the madness of the desire for personal power over others and the obsession. It's not saying, don't make your reputation or your position or whatever it is that is your particular thing paramount because you're just not supposed to. Like, it would be the greatest thing if you could achieve whatever its ego desires are, but you're just not allowed to. It's not what it says it is. It's not happiness. And I'm starting to believe that. It's very hard to believe something like that because I naturally have the tendency to think, okay, yeah, the greatest things are rank and wealth and whatever iterations appeal to me at the moment. But as the more that God is kind of like, okay, try it out. How do you like it? And the more you sort of see what it's like to actually pursue those things and the downsides to them and the illusion, the mirage around it, you start to learn that that's actually not joy. That's not happiness. There's not a future in it. As well as seeing the other side where you understand what your pursuit of that can do to the other people in the world that you step on to get there. Overall, to me, it feels more like, hey, I'm giving you a helpful hint. God has given us a helpful hint rather than commanding and setting arbitrary fences that keep us from the real good stuff. Kind of like a kid wants to only eat candy. It's very hard to persuade the kid, look, there's a different source of happiness. And you can still have candy, but it can't be the only thing you eat, right? It's got to be the frosting. Light your lantern. This just means think and ask how many people there are in quest of high office in today's countries who are not loved for themselves in the world. I don't need to start a war in the comments about how politicians are, but it's something to ponder. Will you find 50 in 1,000 who are loves for God? And this is in Swedenborg's day. Maybe things have improved since then. And only a few of those will be looking for high office. Given the fact, then, that so few are loves for God, and so many are loves for themselves and the world, and given the fact that these latter kinds of love inspire more acts of service with their fires than loves for God do with theirs, how can people justify their beliefs by the fact that more evil people than good people are eminent and wealthy? This, remember, it's always good to keep the context when you're dipping into Swedenborg, even though I find that you can just isolate statements that are made and find these, what I consider to be sort of greater truths about life that you can extrapolate on in a vacuum. It's always good to think of what's the point he's trying to make here. And the point is, he was seeing all kinds of people saying, look, God can't exist because look at the state of the world. And he's saying this treatise here is saying, well, this particular reason, here's why that shouldn't be an argument against God, because there's actually good being done here, even when it seems like there's not. These words of the Lord lend their support. We're quoting the Bible from Luke. The Lord praised the unjust steward because he had acted prudently. For the children of this generation are more prudent than the children of light in their generation. Isn't that a weird statement? Why is this guy who's supposed to be good in this story saying, this unjust steward is doing good, the children of light have issues? So I tell you, make friends for yourself of the mammon of unrighteousness, so that when you lose it, they may accept you into eternal tents. Just a bizarre statement. And Jesus does this. It's not like it. You can get this fuzzy feeling and warm and fuzzy, but some of his statements are very strange and contradictory, or just not what you'd think would be coming out of that. So Swedenborg writes, the earthly sense of this is obvious. In its spiritual meaning, though, the mammon of unrighteousness means those insights into what is true and good that evil people have, and that they use solely for gaining rank and wealth for themselves. And because here we start to look just a little, what is actual wealth? It's the thing that's eternal, which is the contents of the mind and heart. And if we use our spiritual wealth just to try to get earthly wealth, that is just a terrible financial decision. It is these insights with which good people or children of light make friends, and which accept them into eternal tents. So you can get the same insights that can be used just to get one person up the ladder, which won't matter in a few years when that person's dead and gone. Who cares if it was them or somebody else? But if you can take these and use them for what they were made for, to advance your spiritual life so that you can be of service to others, then that's the eternal tense. That's the whole thing. That's what matters. So that simplifies a little bit of life. Sure, we're free to roam around and think about whatever we want. I would say there's something to the idea of what gets us into the eternal tense. And I'm not talking about sacrifice today for tomorrow, really, because to me it's like we're focusing on trying to get good and true things to ring out and to live by them. That is the eternal. We're setting ourselves up for this permanent connection with heaven, but also you do see dividends in the world. The more that I'm focused on this stuff, the more that I'm going after this rather than going after rank and wealth here, you do see it doesn't always seem like a permanent progression, but you can see that, this stuff really latches onto this. This stuff has a lot more trouble penetrating this. So we can create, even though it's not always there, we can create this kind of little bubble of safety that God can speak to us in, even in dark times. Hopefully, we've added in this little session 1 or 2 little dots in there for you. And if so, that's great. And that's the news from heaven. Let me know in the comments, did it work for you? Does this do anything for you? Like and subscribe if you haven't, and support this program. Become a monthly contributor. This is how you can have stuff like this in the first place. otlemonthly.cosvox.com. We appreciate everyone who's been supporting us. Hey, I hope this did something for you, and I hope it goes out with you into the world and does something good for someone else. That's the point. Thanks, guys.